Hello, and welcome to Weencast, Ween Off the Cuff, Riverdale, Season 7, Episode 12, After the Fall. You may be wondering, why does it sound even shitter than usual today? And that's because I'm recording this audio on my phone. Life is hard, but Riverdale is harder. This is your Ween. We begin today's episode with a rumination by Jughead on the trials, the tribulations, the contrasts, the richness, the complexity of Reggie and Archie's relationship. Two fellows, both alike in being on the basketball team, yet both unalike in that Reggie is into basketball and it's his whole life, and Archie is confused, as usual. As usual. But on this very evening, it is Reggie who's struggling, and Archie who comforts him, for we continue the story immediately from the end of Halloween 2, finding Reggie and Archie in the hospital discussing how Julian drove the car full of bulldogs sports players, not bulldogs dogs, bulldogs, off a bridge in his drunken Halloween fervor. And all of the bulldogs were trapped in the car except Reggie. And it was Reggie who had to swim down and save every one of them. Because, careful, Reggie's a hero. Indeed, Reggie is a hero. But due to racism, very few of Riverdale's denizens recognize Reggie for the hero he is. And in fact, Clifford Blossom wants him kicked off the team. Uncle Frank tries to reason with Clifford about how that's stupid, but Clifford is racist. At the same time, Sheriff Kevin's dad is in Brad Rayberry's apartment with Ethel and Jughead, discussing Ethel's extrajudicial killing of the milkman. And Sheriff Kevin's dad, weirdly, fine with it, totally cool with Ethel killing a man that's NBD, but he does want Ethel to go back to the Sisters of Quiet Mercy. Jughead, luckily, convinces him that that should not happen because that's a terrible place, and he begs Mary Andrews and Alice Cooper to take Ethel in, and Alice is like, oh, of course we'll take Ethel in, because we took Ethel in before. And Betty points out, you took Ethel in, and then you sent her to the Sisters of Quiet Mercy, which is a terrible place. And Alice is like, no, that was your father's idea. I love Ethel. And Betty is both hurt and jealous, and Ethel is nervous. That night, going to sleep, Reggie's depressed because he knows that he'll never be recognized for his heroism in saving any of those boys, but he still had to save them and put his life on the line, because if he had failed to save any of them or run away from the terrible scene of the accident, like any number of sane people might do, he would have been blamed for their deaths due to racism. That is a really heavy thought for Archie. But he takes it in. He handles it admirably, showing us that he's experienced growth this season, just like the rest of us. Next morning, Alice makes a showy demonstration of how she now loves Ethel. She gives Ethel a fancy breakfast, and she ignores Betty, and Betty's hurt. And so when she gets to school, she complains to Veronica about how her mom still sucks, even though her mom is like, I'm not even your mom anymore. And Betty kind of wants to run away from home. And Veronica's like, oh, I would love to have you come over and stay with me, but unfortunately, I don't have a home now either. I live in my movie theater. And Betty says, why don't you just pick the lock at the Pembroke, you know? In English class, the English teacher shares a poem. Her name is Mrs. Thornton, by the way. She shares a poem, Mrs. Thornton does, written by one of the students, called The Phantom. And it's about how everybody thinks they understand the author, but he struggles with the fact that no one really sees him. no one really sees him. It's not a very good poem. And so, even though Kevin mistakes it for Clay's, we all know it's by Archie. And it's about being gay Archie. But everybody tells Archie it's a great poem, and he's utterly humiliated. At basketball practice, Uncle Frank names Archie the captain of the b-ball team, and Archie's a little embarrassed because he feels like Reggie ought to be the captain because Reggie is the best player. And that's fair. In the principal's office, Principal Featherhead and Dr. Werthers congratulate Ethel on her return and her successful killing of an adult man, act like they always liked Ethel instead of being absolute huge dicks to her last time they saw her and banishing her from school and threatening her life with a railway share and shit like that. And they claim the milkman was but a mere drifter who was inspired and driven mad by comic books that caused him to kill. And obviously Jughead thinks that's absolute BS. And Jughead's right. In Uncle Frank's office after b-ball practice, Archie questions Uncle Frank's decision. But Uncle Frank reminds him that Clifford Blossom runs things on this team, and if Clifford says Reggie can't be captain, that's how it's got to be. Uncle Frank then gives Archie a powerful family object, his poor father's captaincy patch. I didn't know that was a thing in basketball, but apparently it's a patch with the letter C on it, and the captain wears it. And it belonged to Archie's dad. The next morning, Betty announces to her mother that she is leaving the house. She's going to go live with Veronica in Veronica's apartment together, and there's going to be no one to watch them, and they're just going to have endless fun together, and Alice doesn't care. So Betty picks the lock on the Pembroke, and Veronica sets up a party for them with Clay and Kevin because they want to have some real fun, not like the fun they don't have when Reggie and Archie are over. At the Blossoms Manor, Cheryl confronts her father. She's enraged that the basketball season is going to continue while Julian is literally in the hospital in a coma. But Clifford is obsessed with the lost glory of the b-ball team, and how a great sports team can unite a town in a singular purpose, and he demands Cheryl continue being the head cheerleader or suffer a fate worse than Julian's. Yes, it seems like he's threatened Cheryl with death if she does not lead the pep rally, because this is Riverdale. At the sleepover at the Pembroke, Betty and Veronica and Clay and Kevin do a rousing rendition of one of my favorite Roger and Hammerstein tunes, I'm going to wash that man right out of my hair. And they wear cute little swimsuits while they do it. I don't know why, because they are in a house and they don't have a pool, but nonetheless, that it is a song that one performs in a cute little swimsuit, so there it is. And I found it to be a pretty rousing rendition. Also, it's a song from a classic musical. It's dumb. It's always going to be silly. It's a silly song. It's a silly concept. It's silly. It's Riverdale. It's silly. After the song, they drink rum, because Veronica, she talks about how it's her parents' rum, obviously. And then Veronica cuts right to the chase. Kevin, Clay, you spent time in the boys' locker room. Who's got the biggest dick at school? Is it Reggie? Is it Archie? Kevin and Clay hem and haw, but finally they reveal the truth. It's Dilton. It is Dilton. Dilton has the biggest dick in school. Needless to say, this news rocks the foundations of everyone present. Next day, at the pep rally, Betty, Veronica, Kevin, and Clay are all hungover and wearing dark glasses inside. Meanwhile, Dilton is just hung. Cheryl is struggling to feign enthusiasm while she leads the pep rally and gives a speech. And when Archie comes up to be feted as the new captain, he's worried about her, and he very sweetly expresses concern. And then Cheryl asks him, apropos of nothing, to make a speech. We cut away from the speech immediately, so we know it must have been bad. But poor Archie, miserable afterwards, finds that Mrs. Thornton, the English teacher, comes up to him, and she tries to cheer him up, telling him that, speaking off the cuff, as if one is a Ween, is hard, and she encourages him to keep writing, keep enriching himself, that he could put as much energy into his writing as he puts into his sports if he wanted to. And fellas, I think what we got here is a classic music football conundrum, but instead it's writing b-ball. The editor of Pep Comics is proud of Ethel for her extrajudicial killing, and he is excited that she's back from the Sisters of Quiet Mercy so she can start illustrating comic books again, and he wants her and Jughead to write a new story. But when they suggest it be a sequel to the Milkman story, since they now have personal hands-on experience with the Milkman murder themselves, he turns that down because he doesn't want to get any more flack from Dr. Werthers, who's already writing fiery editorials every day to condemn comic books and get all the parents in town whipped up in a fervor of fear. And the editor-in-chief says, when they keep suggesting milkman, he says, "No milkmen. From now on, consider me lactose intolerant." That's so real. After school, Betty and Veronica do some dress shopping at Archie's mom's store, and she starts to get suspicious when they ask to have both of their dresses sent to the Pembroke. And Betty explains that they're now living together, and Betty's mom apparently doesn't care. The Bulldogs come out of school to find their mascot statue, Peppy, stolen. And not just stolen by any old creep, but stolen by Captain Brett Weston Wallace of the Stonewall Stallions. Yes, we saw him briefly in Reggie's flashback about how everyone at Stonewall was racist, but now he's here for a whole scene. Brett hamming it up in like a West Side Story, John Travolta as Danny Zuko, like cheesy 50s tough guy routine. Confronts Archie and Reggie, tells them about how they're going to lose, hops into his car with his fellow Stonewall Stallions, and scoots away with the mascot statue. And obviously this simply galvanizes our heroic Bulldogs against them, and Reggie crafts a whole strategy on how to beat Stonewall using the information he gathered from being on the team for a while, and he gives it to everybody on the team, a whole strategy, assigning them to players to suit their strengths, and Archie feels guilty because Reggie's doing all the work of the team captain, and he's doing it well. And after the team meeting and after dinner, they discuss this struggle while they're washing the dishes together because they're boy best friends. And Reggie tells Archie he doesn't care about being captain, he doesn't care what happens as long as he succeeds in basketball and he gets to go pro. But Archie feels lost because he plays basketball to be close to his dad, not necessarily to win, and it's not really his passion. And he's embarrassed to admit to Reggie that his passion might be writing bad poems. And that's fair. Over at Jughead's train car, where Ethel and Jughead, I guess, now live as opposite sex best friends, Ethel only wants to draw the milkman due to her trauma, and she talks about how only Jughead has really been there for her in this time. Everyone else has been gaslighting her, telling her this didn't happen or that didn't happen, sending her to go live with horrible nuns and trying to imprison her. And she wants to speak her truth. She needs to draw a milkman-related story in order to exorcise this demon and show people that, what really happened to her. And Jughead wants to help her, but he's got to figure out a scheme so they can publish the story. At the Pembroke, Betty and Veronica are having a sapphic manicure party. Veronica, who clearly has autism and her special interest is name dropping, talks about talks about how this nail polish is Grace Kelly's favorite, and she's painting Betty's nails her pretty pink. And then they start comparing the horribleness of their moms and how Veronica's mom used to do manicure parties with her, and they used to have fun. But Betty says her mom pretty much started being weird to her as soon as she got her period, and they haven't been close since. And Veronica comforts her and says, yeah, they're basically orphans, but that's okay because they have each other, and they both have their fears. Betty feels so alienated from her whole family, and sometimes she wishes she were adopted. Veronica is afraid to find out that she was a mistake and her parents didn't really want her, but at least they have their girl best friends. And as Veronica says, Betty shouldn't feel ashamed or sad. She's absolutely aces and beautiful. And you're like, all right, that's homoerotic. Sure, it's Riverdale. That's fine. And then they start talking about how they're both so happy for Kevin and Clay, and honestly a little jealous, because mustn't it be easier to be gay? Wouldn't you understand your partner more? Then you don't have that battle of the sexes concern. This is all verbatim material from the episode. And then Betty says, I read in my fake Kinsey book that 81% of young women experiment with other girls before they're 18. And Veronica's like, obviously, I've kissed a girl. And you'd know who she was if I told you. She's famous. And Betty's like, OMG, TBH, I've fantasized about kissing a girl. And Veronica's like, whoa, really? Who was it? Who was it? Was it someone we know? Was it someone in this room right now? Is the person you fantasized about in the room with us right now? And Betty's like, OMG, yes, it was you, Veronica. And Veronica's like, why don't we just kiss? Why don't we just kiss and find out? Why don't we just kiss and find out? And they're like, oh my God. And then they're about to kiss. I shit you not. And you might think, why is this a big deal? Why is this a big deal? They literally kissed in the first episode in a classic lesbian sweeps week fake kiss that Cheryl literally called out as baloney in the episode. In the episode. But this time, they kissed on purpose by talking explicitly about how attracted they were to each other. 7 long years. 7 long years. We've toiled in the Veronica queerbaiting mines. And now, Roberto says it wasn't queerbaiting, it was saving the world? I guess we'll see. We've still got a long way to go. Anyway, they don't even get to actually kiss. They almost kiss, and then Archie's mom knocks on the door with Smithers and is like, oh, you've been hiding in here, even though your parents kicked you out. And then they tell Mary exactly what happened with their parents kicking them out. And she's like, well, that's bad parenting. I'm going to call your parents and yell at them till they let you back home. And so Betty is sent back home with her mom, and Veronica's given back the key to the Pembroke. So I guess it's not as good as if they actually kissed, but at least they have like homes again. Cheryl, speaking of lesbianism, Cheryl is at the hospital and she's weeping over Julian's comatose form, talking about how even though she hates him, she wants him to be home, she doesn't want him to die of a coma. And wouldn't you know it, he wakes up. And I think that's pivotal. I legitimately think that's pivotal. Because the fact of the matter is, Julian is a pattern breaker, Jason didn't speak at all until the 100th episode. And then he was dispatched pretty quickly in season 6. Like, when he was resurrected from the dead, he ended up having to die again in a fiery conflagration because of reasons that I don't really remember, but he was evil or something. And he had to die over and over. He died in the first season, and then his corpse got drug up, and then it was found again in season 3, and then it was in the house, and then it had to be set on fire, and then he came back to life, and then, but he never was able to speak, and he was always doomed. But Julian, despite how much he sucks, and his lack of eyebrows. He's been speaking from the beginning, and when he went into Sweetwater River this time, he didn't die. He didn't die. He didn't die, you know? I think it all makes sense. I think it all makes sense. It all makes sense. And while she's creeping around her house afterwards, Cheryl overhears her father and Principal Featherhead scheming to replace Reggie with a white player named K.O. Kelly, whom some of us may recall as Katie Keene's boyfriend. And they want Reggie to fail in this next basketball fight with Stonewall Prep, and then they can have an excuse to kick him off the team and replace him with K.O. Kelly, who, as Clifford says, is more like us, a good old red-blooded American. And of course, Cheryl's horrified. And when she gets to school the next day, she tells Archie all about the plot, and Archie tells Reggie all about the plot, and they speculate how can they possibly fight racism. Back at Pep Comics, editor-in-chief really likes Jughead and Ethel's new story, which isn't about a milkman, but about a mailman who's in a slightly different uniform and goes to people's houses delivering mail instead of milk, but is otherwise a murderer. But he's still kind of wary because he knows there's going to be backlash because it's not really, a high-level disguise. Dr. Werther's is going to be able to figure out that it's ripped from the headlines of their own lives. But Jughead says, why not fight the future, I mean, we all know they're coming for us in the comics industry anyway. Let's say what we want to say and go out with a bang. And the editor-in-chief guy, he falls for it. He's like, all right, let's do it. So they decide to publish Jughead and Ethel's mailman story. Archie and Reggie also prepare to fight the future. And in this case, fighting the future means fighting for the future by unionizing the basketball team to force Clifford to make Reggie the captain. They all go to him in his house and they tell him that if he doesn't make Reggie the team captain, Archie's going to quit, and then Reggie's going to quit, then Fangs is going to quit, and then everybody's going to quit because they're a team and they're brothers. And Reggie deserves to be the captain, and they're right. Late that night, Betty and Veronica simultaneously call each other on the phone and tell each other that they love each other. I shit you not. And then they plan a date to the big game the next day. And you're like, it's not queer baiting, it's saving the world. But Roberto could do so much to hurt us in the 8 to 10 episodes that remain. Only time will tell us. The next day, the Bulldogs are in the locker room. They're getting ready to play. Reggie thanks the team. He tells them about how his folks are here to see him play as the captain. And Archie and Fang psych everybody up and make everybody hyped for Reggie. And Archie and Reggie share a special moment, appreciating each other and everything they've worked hard for because they're boy best friends. And they get out on the court, and it's an ultimate slow-mo showdown with Brett. All the lights go down. It's just Brett and Reggie in the spotlight. Slow motion. Wow. They fight over the ball. Reggie gets it. And it's over. We just see a montage of people listening to the game. And we know they've won. Julian and Cheryl listen happily. And I start to wonder, maybe, is Julian going to reform? That doesn't seem likely, but I guess it's possible. Clifford's also listening, but of course he's resentful and angry. And Reggie and Archie, post-game, are having a great time with the other guys. They got back the Peppy mascot statue, and they're all hanging out because they're boy best friends. And afterwards, at bedtime, Archie and Reggie are hanging out in the bedroom together, getting ready to go sleepy. talking about how Reggie is the record breaker of the game and he's MVP and his parents are so proud of him. And Archie gives him his dad's captain patch. And Reggie's like, oh my gosh, you can't give this to me, Archie. It's so important to you. And Archie's like, no, I want you to have it, son. And that's beautiful. And Reggie encourages Archie to keep writing, to really follow his true passion. Even though, as Archie says, I don't know if the world's ready for beatnik poet Archie Andrews. And I sure am not, Your Honor, I sure am not. But even though our boys are happy right now, narrator Jughead warns us the storm is approaching. And that's where next week's promo takes us. Next week's episode is called The Crucible. There's accusations of sexual deviance. There's accusations of sexual indoctrination. There's censorship left and right. There's paranoia about comic books, and Jughead and Ethel have to set up some kind of secret comic smuggling ring. And I think it's going to be good stuff. I think it's going to be great. It's Riverdale. It's Riverdale, Your Honor. I'm too sleepy to say more, but rest assured, when Riverdale's on, I'm on. Thank you for listening. This has been your Ween.